Well, in the talks Thursday night, there was an outline, and a lot of things were covered, especially by Peter Fries and by Larry Seliger and Joan Morley and the others. And I think you all have all of that on videotape. But there's so much more that went on. And for me, I think one of the interesting things is the intensive course. And for Marta, the teacher education program, which we both participated in. But about the intensive course, you recall that Peter Fries mentioned the evening gatherings that the students got together with. The students lived in the dorms. You saw from the CBS movie that they lived in South Quad. In the summer, we had a whole house, Victor Vaughn House over by the medical campus. And not only the intensive course students, but the teacher training program students and the staff. Some of the staff lived there for the summer. So there's a lot of social going on, interaction there in the building and in the evening programs with these sing-alongs. I quoted a brief bit of one of the songs. So there are a number of songs written especially for ELI or adapted for ELI. And then the students put on these programs, always in the hall where the poster session was yesterday at the Rackham building. And they put a lot of work into organizing their programs each Friday night. And sometimes they went very well, sometimes not so well. I remember one time the Turkish students had brought a 16 millimeter reel that they borrowed from the consulate in Detroit, probably, big reel. But there was no take-up reel. So, but they said, no, you've got to see that film. So let's just run the film into this big carton. Well, you can't imagine how much film is actually on one of these big reels. And the carton filled up with film and spilling over on the floor. It was quite a disaster. But we saw the film. But then, and Marta will remember this too, for the teacher education program. And these intensive courses were just 8 weeks. But in the course of it, we had all these evening sessions, the Friday programs. Toward the end of the course, everyone would gather for a group photograph. And it was usually taken in the Michigan League ballroom or the Michigan Union ballroom. Staff and faculty and staff on the front row and all the students behind. So that was a big gathering. And always the same photographer from, I've forgotten his name yet, a studio right over here on Liberty Street. And then, probably a week later, was the closing ceremony. And it wasn't just handing out certificates. It was a dinner in the League ballroom or the Michigan Union ballroom. Students gave talks, 2 or more students spoke. Sometimes there was a guest speaker, certificates handed out. Maybe we sang songs, and you remember yourself.
We did. We sang songs, and by then we were pretty confident. We felt we had passed the test. So, I would like to, focus my impressions on, from my side of the story, the student. And when I arrived, the first person that I met was the coordinator, and extremely friendly, very welcoming, and doors open all the time. And I befriended right away the secretary, so we were, very close knit right away. When I first arrived in the class, I felt like Liza Doolittle because my phonology teacher asked us all to introduce ourselves. And we had to give our name and say a little background about us. And I said, my name is Marta Bouchard, and and she says, wait a minute, can you say your name again? I said, Marta Buchar. Could you say it a little bit slower? And I said, Marta Buchar. And he said, good. Now tell us a little bit about yourself. So I went on and I told a little bit myself. And then after I finished, he said, Ms. Buchar, could you stay after class? And I was, what did I do or what did I say? So the first day, the first class. So I stayed after class and he said, I want you to come to my office because I want to do just a little research. So I went to his office and he said, I want you to do me a favor and could you repeat these words for me? So I did. And he said, thank you. And he said, I just wanted to let you know that has anybody tell you that you have a lisp? I said, no. And he said, it's not very noticeable, but I think it will help you in your teaching career. Because when we're talking about sounds and about teaching the children, you have to model the perfect sounds. So your name, you have to stress in your name, in your last name, that you are not Buchar with the whistle. You are Buchar with a T sound, which is an aspirated sound. And I was shocked. I said, wow, what a lecture. It was wonderful to learn that he was looking at my teaching career already. I had to model the correct sounds, and I had to know, first of all, myself well. And that was carried throughout my life, my entire teaching career, 22 years of teaching English as a second language. And I remember how caring each teacher was. The same thing with I was telling Bill about my literature teacher. When they ask us about, your backgrounds, I was the youngest in the whole group, and everybody had teaching careers, experience working already, which I had very limited. I had just worked for 2 years as a teacher. And I felt, that, look at these people, why I am in the middle of these very experienced teachers. But the teachers at ELI took every single student as an individual. So when my English teacher said, we want you to write a book that you read lately and how it impressed you or didn't impress you. So I wrote, very simply. And people, I saw them writing pages and pages the rest of the class, and I was the first one to finish. And he used my example, the English teacher, and he said some very positive things about my paper, and that gave me so much confidence. So from then on, I felt that all of the teachers were analyzing my background, not comparing me with a group and not with their goals that they had. Mm-hmm. Their goal to achieve was to help each individual. And it really had a lasting, impression on me because when I came back to, after I went back home, and my dad said, well, you have this diploma, you had this experience, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to school. I want to go back to the university. I want to continue to study because that was my goal. I said, I'm not finished learning, so I'm just scratching the surface. So I did. I did my undergraduate degree, and I had my master's degree in the States.
You could have been singing one of the songs that the students sang, which maybe they still sing here. I don't know. I want to go back. I want to go back to Michigan. I want to go back. I want to go back to some of the coin I spent.
Yes.
But I had this similar experience to Marta because I came 10 years before she did to the teacher education program. And I'd had 3 years of teaching experience overseas and was bound to go, on the way to go overseas again. And I realized I knew very little about what I was actually doing. I just picked it up along the way. Never had an education course. So, but in the course of my summer here, it's like my shorter course than yours. You were here for the fall. In the summer here, and it was besides the interaction of the teachers and the things I learned that I should have known before I went overseas the first place to teach, that the teachers themselves, the group that were together, not only, I think we had about 50 American teachers who were going abroad, 20 teachers from overseas. They really reinforced my confidence like yours. And by the end of the summer, when I had an opportunity to stay on in Michigan, I grabbed it and forgot about that particular overseas job.
So
There was some
I think it's,
unusual students. There was and because of their circumstances, really, there was the daughter of the executed leader of the Japanese, or Tojo. There was the widow of Lee Harvey Oswald, JFK's assassin. And they were brought in special sponsorships here for people in Ann Arbor who felt that because, for one reason or the other, they would benefit from the program.
and there was one student in my program which was very unfortunate that he had to be taken away from the program. But it was done in such a diplomatic and so low key that I felt that it was the respect, they were showing the respect to this student, and so I admire that too.
Well, one thing that wasn't
I want,
mentioned in the talks that I heard was the overseas programs of the Institute. And at the time I came, the Institute had already been very active in, for example, Southeast Asia. There was a Southeast Asia Regional English Program. It was headed by Ed Anthony, later director here, and the staff were people from the ELI.
right.
They were in Laos, Thailand, Vietnam. They wrote materials for those, extensive materials for Thailand. And then there was a program in Indonesia, and the ELI staff, at least 3 that I know of, were involved in teacher education in Indonesia in the early 1950s and through the 50s. And then later on, Bob Lotto organized a group with Ford Foundation and Fulbright support of reaching out to, I think it was 10 Japanese universities, and they
Wow.
brought to Ann Arbor
Yeah, that's right.
professors of English from those schools. People were involved in training of teachers, and they spent a year here. One of them got a doctorate here under sponsorship of that program and in connection with ELI. So
I remember that. Mhm.
yeah, so that was and it's not just the only outreach, but there was a lot of it very important.
Thank you, Katie, so much for giving us this opportunity in this very meaningful year for us of our 50th wedding anniversary. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
That
It
was very
great.
nice to wrap up. Thank you.